Welcome to episode 83 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Schornstein, and I am a board-certified sports dietitian and runner based in Santa Cruz, California. I provide virtual nutrition coaching and other services to a wide variety of active clients, and I host this podcast to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition approach towards optimal health and performance. So just an FYI, we are doing video today. So if you prefer to watch your interviews, I've actually had a YouTube page for a while now, but with audio only videos with a static image. So things are finally entering the modern age over here and getting a little more exciting with actual videos. As an elder millennial, technology is sometimes a little challenging for me. So I'm stoked to finally make this happening. So head on over to the YouTube page if you want to watch this, or you can of course continue to listen audio only. All right, let's talk about today's show. I always love interviewing my fellow podcasters, and today Jonathan Levitt from For the Long Run podcast joins me for an athlete nutrition profile. He's based out of Boulder, Colorado, and wears many different hats as a runner himself, a podcast host, and a senior sales executive over at Inside Tracker. We had a really awesome conversation on all things running and performance and everyday nutrition, and way too many things to even mention with tons of tangents. So let's just dive in. So I hope you enjoy this athlete nutrition profile with Jonathan Levitt. Jonathan, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How is your morning going so far?
It's going well. I got 8.5 miles in of running. I have my avocado blanket, which feels appropriate for this Eat for Endurance podcast. And excited to chat.
Awesome. And I know you recently celebrated, was it 300 episodes on your own podcast for the long run? So congrats on that. That's a lot of episodes.
Thank you. It's 5 years of episodes weekly since 2019, including a handful of weeks that had 2 episodes in 2020 because I was bored and needed to talk to people. And then all of a sudden I found myself with a backlog of like 20 episodes.
Wow. So I think we talked about this offline once where I was like, yeah, I've had a podcast for 5 years and this will be episode 83. But you know what? That's okay.
It's okay. Most don't get past 3. So
yeah,
great work.
There you go. I'm actually stoked. This past year's been my first consistent year, and I do 2 episodes a month, and that's like the pace I can keep up with. So
sweet.
Everyone has their own thing. So I normally start my interviews, talking about nutrition roots in these athlete nutrition profiles. But I feel like I need, since you're here, and I think I'm just going to throw the question you always ask everybody.
Damn it.
Which maybe isn't an original thing, and maybe someone's already done this, but who is Jonathan Levitt?
So I started asking this question on my podcast out of forced efficiency. So I host For the Long Run, aimed at exploring the why. And I was producing all my episodes, and the piece of the puzzle that I delayed the longest was the intro. And so I would record an intro introducing the guest, and for some reason it was like I would always wait until like Thursday night at 8 p.m. and record this and then post it Friday morning. And after like 40 or 50 episodes, I started asking the guest, who are you? Yeah. And I stopped recording these intros because people tell you what they care most about when you put them on the spot like that. And then it drives a really interesting conversation because you can tailor it to however they answer. And some people are, I'll call it boring and say, oh, I'm a runner and I live in Boulder. But other people are like, well, I'm a curious person and I like living and being curious and exploring and doing adventures with friends and meeting people and traveling and all of these things that make people unique versus the one qualifier. Like if you're coming on my podcast, you probably run. So we know you're a runner. And so, that's who I am, a curious person who really loves things that make me feel like I'm living in that moment. And I love the podcast medium because when else in today's society are you forced to not pay attention to anything else besides the person you're talking to for an hour? Like, it really doesn't happen unless you're on like a long car drive car ride or
Hmm.
on a run with someone. That's pretty much it. Maybe that's why I
Yeah.
like both of those things, all three of those things.
Yeah.
Anyway, long
Yeah.
answer, as I like.
Yes, yes, and thank you for indulging me in that one. And I guess if you're on my show, you obviously have to eat. So I feel like things are a little
You're a
different
human,
for
you
that
have to
one.
eat.
You are a human being on my show. You have to eat. But yeah, no, thank you for answering that question. And now we're going to dive into what my normal first question is, just digging into your nutrition roots. So tell us a little bit about growing up in the Boston area and what kinds of memories you have surrounding food and mealtimes.
Chowder and lobster. Um, so I grew up outside of Boston area, Metro West Boston. Meal times were always important for my parents and family. I have a younger sister, and I don't know, 5, 6, 7 nights out of the week, we'd sit down, eat dinner together, and it was, I didn't realize that at the time, but it was very intentional. And then my mom and sister were both diagnosed with celiac, which was my first experience with like restriction related to eating,
Hmm.
like necessary restriction related to
Yeah,
eating.
yeah.
And then I started dabbling in paleo and gluten-free and low carb. And that was at the same time I got into running. So like that combo was interesting because I was injured frequently. Um, and I saw a tweet yesterday that said, what's a fad that you've tried that didn't work and why? And I replied, paleo. And because it doesn't. And for it does work for some, but um yeah, I dove into lower carb and paleo eating because I thought it was what was the healthiest thing to do. It's
When
like, oh
was
yeah,
this?
this was 2013.
Oh, so more
Uh
okay, when you were an adult then. Okay. Got
yeah,
it.
I was 23. So the barefoot running was a thing. So I was like, all right, I've got my toe shoes and I'm eating like my ancestors. And I was like hooked on this paleo thing. And I was also hooked on the 5-finger running, and I kept getting stress fractures.
Hmm.
Go
Yeah.
figure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so as time goes on, so that's like 2013, as I mentioned. Then I get connected with Insight Tracker, and then I really start learning about nutrition, and um, due to being surrounded by dietitians all the time. And so, like, I sat next to a dietitian for 5 years, and
Was that Stevie
she's um,
or
Ashley
someone else?
Weaver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Stevie is wonderful as well, but unfortunately, we've never worked in the same
Ah,
office. Always remote for Stevie. But um, yeah, then I started to get to know all of these dietitians, and I started asking all these questions and learning a ton about nutrition. And at that time, I was like, wow, there's so much that I don't know, and there's so much value in working with a dietitian. So over the years, I've worked with, I don't know, 3 or 4 different dietitians. I like to do it, I don't know, quarterly or twice a year for like a full check-in. I send in my blood work, and we have a 30 or 45-minute consult around progress and what am I specifically working on? Am I eating enough? And what do my nutrient levels look like? Um, and yeah, it's just a resource that like I can't imagine not having at this point.
yeah. Awesome. I'm going to put a pin in that and we're going to rewind some more because I want to learn a little bit more about you when you were younger. Because, I was kind of Googling around as, one does when researching these things. And I came across you're just like your LinkedIn. And I was looking back at all the various things that you did. By the way, I saw you like planned like laser tag parties or something. I mean, there were like all kinds of things on there. I'm like, wow. But what struck me is like you've always been in the sporting space in some capacity at all these various different roles you had, and a lot in the endurance space, whether as through nearly a decade with Inside Tracker or all these other roles. So I'm curious, like when you were younger, were you an active kid? Because I know you got into running later in life, but you
Make me sound
clearly
like an old
had this.
person.
No, you're not that old. How old are you actually?
33.
Yeah, you're. Oh my
Later in
god,
life.
you're
In my
later. Well,
60s, 80s.
okay, sorry. That came off wrong.
I'm just kidding.
You're way younger than me. But my point is that, you clearly had an interest in sports because it was always something related to what you were doing. So I'm kind of curious what young Jonathan got up to.
Yeah, I played baseball and hockey growing up. I
Hmm.
hated running a lot. That the laser tag mention, I used to run birthday parties at the Boston sports clubs. And so we do sports parties or laser tag parties. And so I was like 16 to 18 years old doing birthday parties for like 7 to 12-year-olds. And with laser tag, like the kids would think it was the coolest thing ever when the not instructor, when the organizer would jump in and play. And the joke was on them because it was so much fun. Just like running around in the dark, shooting laser tag,
I
playing
love
laser tag.
that's on your LinkedIn. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was super fun. And then we'd serve them pizza and they'd leave pizza and I'd eat like a whole pizza every weekend. It was a wonderful high school job. So I played, like I said, baseball and hockey growing up. My dad was is super into cycling and has been since he could walk, basically. And so right before I got my license, I was really into cycling. Between 16 and like 22, maybe, I was really not into cycling. But I would do like 25 to 40-mile rides with my dad.
Oh, wow.
Back then, and just like really loved road riding. And yeah, so it was always like sports and fitness was always something that was just like part of my life growing up,
And
but not running.
yeah. Was nutrition even like a consideration back then? Because you kind of got into the fad stuff later. And you obviously were aware of, like with family members with celiac disease, that you had to eat certain ways for health and to feel good. So was that something you thought about for your own body?
Not really. I didn't
Hmm.
think about anything when it comes to nutrition, like positive or negative. My parents were and are focused on nutrient dense foods and eating well. And growing up, we always had good food to eat. And we'd eat salmon a couple of times a week. And my parents would cook a lot and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And again, meal times were important. Like dinner time was important to share. um we never had soda in the house growing up. It was always like a nice treat when we could go out and have a Coke or whatever.
Hmm.
um but yeah, fairly like fairly average, maybe average experience, or like um non-eventful. I don't know, like
Yeah.
pretty good overall.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Um, so I heard you speak on another podcast about, some of your early struggles with the road marathon distance, and you kind of started alluding to this as you were getting to the fad stuff and you had stress fractures and all these things. But, in this particular discussion, I think it was on the drop, you were hyper focused on breaking 3 hours and you kept missing the mark, right? And obviously training and psychology and just so many factors go into performance. But since this is a nutrition focused podcast, I'm curious, was this kind of aligned with all these different fads that you were trying nutrition wise? Like, what was kind of the nutrition landscape at that time? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
I was like big on UCAN and that as a fueling source. And then I had a conversation with Lisa McDowell, and dietitians who have been in the sports dietitian space for a number of years hopefully know Lisa. She is a pioneer in the space and knows everyone or a lot of people, and works with Olympic athletes. She works in a hospital in Detroit and also with the Detroit Red Wings.
Hmm.
And Lisa, in probably 2015, told me, you need to consume more caffeine and eat more sugar around running. I was like, what? This is a dietitian telling me to consume more caffeine and sugar?
Hmm.
What is going on here? And so I did that, and my running improved dramatically, like that. I was not taking caffeine prior to runs. I was not fueling with carbs. Um, and I had never tried gels or
Mm,
gummies or anything. I didn't really
okay.
know what I was doing. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make like a chia seed energy whatever, and make my own uh sports hydration mix. And it's like, you don't need to do that. All this stuff exists and it's very easy to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
A-
That's true.
and I had not yet encountered goo or scratch or any of these. I didn't think that you needed salt. Like all these things that I know now as like fundamental pillars to success as an athlete, I wasn't doing any of them, and I was probably pretty underfueled constantly. Um, and that's
Were you
still
paleo at
something.
the time? Like, what was going on
I
with the
think the
everyday
paleo
eating?
experiment was like a 2-year deal.
Okay.
As I was getting into weightlifting towards the end of college, um, probably stopped doing that in like 2013, maybe
Okay.
2014. Um, and yeah, so I started eating gels and caffeine, and things improved from there. Appreciate
But
you,
how
Lisa.
but I assume that you were doing more than that because that's like surrounding the workouts. What about in the everyday? Like, were you kind of, because you said you thought you were underfueled. Do you think you were underfueled from like the everyday eating perspective, or
Probably.
was it just, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
probably.
all right. Were you still following a particular style of eating, or were you just kind of eating what you wanted at that point?
Mostly what I wanted, but like paleo-ish tendencies.
So probably still a little carb phobic, it sounds like.
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, you later ended up breaking 3 hours, and that was after switching coaches and clearly like a huge mindset shift. And you were trail running and doing all these different things. And I'm curious if you made any other changes to your nutrition as well, other than what you just mentioned.
Um, Honestly, the mental side of things was the biggest driver for change.
Mm.
I started chasing um, breaking 3 hours in the marathon in probably 2014 or 2015. Yeah, 2015. And it didn't happen until 2019. And so I ran a bunch of marathons. My first marathon was 3:35. Then I ran 3:27. Then I ran 3:27, 9 seconds faster. And then I ran, I think, 4:01, and then 3:20, and then 2:59. So in the process of trying to break 3, I had a race where I didn't even break 4.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
rough.
that was a brutal day.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was. I probably fueling was a huge part of that. Getting comfortable with like more than 50 grams of carbs an hour in training and
Hmm.
racing, um, certainly helped. Um, we hear now about athletes who are pushing 100 grams of carbs an hour
I
at
know.
the high end. I can't fathom getting that down, but I
Hmm.
was probably like in my first couple of marathons, I was consuming like 2 servings of UCAN in
Oh,
in like
yeah.
3.5 hours,
Yeah.
and maybe one packet of gummies or like something else. Um, and I just remember those um like the squeeze tubes that are meant for shampoo. And I would
Hmm.
I would like make a mix of the two things. I'm like, I'm burning fat. And it was like, no, you're struggling and bonking is what you're it's what you're
And
doing.
breaking down your muscles for energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. And were you, so around this time, you started working with a different coach, and as you said, you kind of finally hit this long-term goal you had. Was this the time you were also working with various dietitians to kind of tweak and change your fueling, or
Yeah,
had you
so
not gotten there yet?
in the beginning of my work with Inside Tracker in
Hmm.
2014, I would like speak with one of our dietitians every time I did a blood test.
Oh, cool.
And so that was roughly quarterly. And
Okay.
it was mainly like figuring out how to continue trending in the right direction with things like cholesterol and testosterone and
Hmm.
whatnot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but mostly like okay, things are going well. here are some questions about your iron group and whatnot. Um, it wasn't really until the last couple of years that I started working like paying for consults with
Oh,
dietitians.
got it. Mm-hmm.
I worked with Erin Kenny, who is a dietitian that specializes in GI. I've worked
Mm-hmm.
with Kylie Van Horn, who I
Yep.
have an ongoing
Yep.
relationship
Yep.
with, also to work on GI. We did
Mm-hmm.
a GI map
Yep.
stool test, which was really
Yep.
helpful in having her interpretation of it. Alex Borsuk, sports dietitian out in Portland. She has
Mm-hmm.
one of the cutest dogs on the planet, Otto. Um, so it really was just an excuse to see Otto. Um, and Stevie, I actually set Stevie up with my sister, who is doing 3 sessions with her. Um, I feel like there was one, Ashley Reaver, as I mentioned, through Insight Tracker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Worked with her a bunch. I feel like I'm missing one, but anyway, that's been what I've. So working with Kylie recently on
Mm-hmm.
both fueling for races and like better snacking and
Yeah.
modifying macros. I was like like way too high of a fat percentage,
Mm.
um and not nearly enough protein. I was getting like 80 grams of protein a day.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just been like really, and I'm someone who like knows enough to be dangerous about nutrition. And so for someone like
Yeah.
that, it's really important to have an expert in your corner, because for me, it's not like I understand the basics and I can do the basics and then I can mess up from there. And so it's having like a backstop or a check-in
Mm-hmm.
has been super helpful on, a quarterly or biannual basis.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree with that. I know Stevie and Kylie, they're both awesome. So you're definitely in good hands there.
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. And, there's everyone can do N of one experiments. And, I think we were kind of going back to something we had said in the very beginning, like about paleo, like everything works for someone. I
Right.
mean, there's always somebody out there where
Totally.
this one thing will work for you, but it's, so it's kind of combining what we know in scientific literature, and obviously that's, nutrition is still a fairly young science and we're always learning new things and changing things, and it's also seeing what works for you. And as you said, like not getting, like, a lot and it's really easy to get lost in that and get a little misguided sometimes, so having kind
Totally.
of that outside perspective to help is very good sometimes. I I know you moved to Boulder, a few years ago, and I know that was very life-changing for you. And I'm curious how this very dramatic lifestyle shift from Boston has influenced you, whether that's how you train, how you eat, other aspects of your life. I know for your podcast and your friend circle and your running circle, this has been huge. But yeah, I'd just love to hear a little bit about that.
So everyone's familiar with the saying, like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Hmm.
And that's true. And in Boulder, it's a lot easier to find people who are going to push you in the right direction, because everyone here is here for a reason. And many of those people are here because they love the outdoors, or they're betting on themselves as an athlete, or something. And so there's just something about the type of person that gravitates towards this place, let alone the fact that like there are Olympians everywhere and professional athletes
Yeah.
everywhere. And so I find myself gravitating towards those types of people, because like I run with Kara most weeks, Kara Goucher, and like every time I
I
run
see
with her,
that.
yeah, and every time I run with her, I learn something, and it's like fascinating, and it's so, and then like I crave that. And we had a friend in town this past week of his wife and his daughter, and we ran with Kara on Tuesday, and he was like, "Wow, it was so fun because she's exactly like she sounds like on the podcast. Like it's like say silly but fun and
Yeah.
awesome and all this
Yeah.
stuff." I was like, "Yeah, isn't it great when people who appear to be awesome on the internet are also awesome and potentially even more awesome in person?"
Totally.
But like those people are everywhere here, whether they're Olympians or not. Those people who help others gravitate, who help others improve and strive for more. Um, And that has changed things for me with the podcast, with Inside Tracker, with my personal life. I met my girlfriend out here, who ironically, I biked past her house growing up all the time. Like
No
she's lived
way.
10 miles away from me
Oh, wow.
for
How
30
funny.
years. So um and we met at a running retreat here, and we were both just like in our element, in our happy place, and that was the version of each other that we saw, and like we're super attracted to and are super attracted to. um
I love that.
and so it's super cool that, like, I don't know, it's just a really interesting mix of people who are all pretty similar, um to a fault sometimes. um but yeah, I love it.
That's cool. Was it intimidating at first, like when you first moved there, or were you just super excited?
Yes. Yes to both. I mean, like, I'm a decent runner, and I often find myself at the back of a pack here, running like 8-minute pace or 8:15. I've been dropped from group runs running 8:15 pace,
Wow. I
which
would not
is
survive there.
which
I'm
is,
slow
but like,
compared to that.
not everybody is like that. But
Sure.
there are plenty of group runs that are 9, 10, 12. But yeah, I mean, like, a lot of the people I run with are Olympic trials qualifiers and whatnot, or faster. And so it was super intimidating at first, but I linked up with this group very early on, and they made me better immediately. This Boulder Underground, and I was running. So a lot of the women there are like 240 to 3 hour marathoners.
Wow.
Some of them are faster, and the men are like 215. Some of them are faster, actually, 215 to 230, just to paint the picture here. And so I was running with the women, and mind you, these are 240 to 3 hour marathoners who would start runs at 8:30 pace, and we would finish those runs at 6:30 pace,
Whew.
2 hours later. And I had never felt as strong as I did at the end of those runs. And so it was like a lesson in pacing. And I think women are better at pacing than men, um, overall. And I was like, okay, we're going 8:30 for the first 30 minutes, then we're at 8, and then we're in the low sevens for the next hour. So it was like a nice hour warm up, and then a nice hour moderate to faster. And so I was like, wow, cool. I actually can run strong and well. Um, and then I got into trails. And the part that's intimidating about trails here is the fact that, like, there are a lot of people who, like, their Saturday long run is 30 miles. And so I would have friends that would come over and use my sauna, and like they ran 30 miles in the morning. And or they do a 12-mile run in the morning and an 8-mile double in the afternoon, so they're at 20 miles in the day when they come over. And it's just like unfathomable to me. Like, I would train for 3 months to be able to run 30 miles. And people here are just like, boom, that's just another Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's wild, but it's also like
Yeah.
really cool, that everything is relative, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
those people had to work really hard to get to where they are, and their normal, or their baseline, is like 100 miles a week or 130 miles a week.
Boulder
And
average, right?
Boulder average is having a shoe sponsor.
Yeah.
um
There you go.
I joked with my friend Matt Daniels, who's a pro trail runner. He joked that the Boulder average literally is having a shoe sponsor, and he's like, dude, I'm a sub 4 miler, but there are 3 of us on my street.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, would you call yourself mostly a trail runner now, or are you still a lover of all terrains and distances?
Yes, the latter. I
Okay.
love both. I love road running, I love running fast, and I love trails and trail adventures for sure.
Um, and so through all these experiences, since moving to Colorado and being around all these people, and also through your podcast. I mean, I know your podcast isn't nutrition focused, but you've spoken with literally hundreds of incredible athletes. I'm curious what nutrition tidbits you've kind of gleaned from all these conversations, both on the mic and off. Whether these things are helpful for you personally, or maybe they're not so helpful. Not to, like, obviously we're not going to call anyone out, but just kind of interested the things that you've observed, you've learned not to do, learned to do, whatever you kind of glean from all these talks you've had.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing with anything, right? Consistency wins. And um I've learned that some of the most successful athletes love pizza and burritos and ice cream and like all of these things that people are for some reason taught to fear. And like pro athletes eat pizza, pro athletes eat burritos, pro athletes eat
Mm-hmm.
whatever they want, and they're doing 80% of what they eat is dialed, and the other 20% is like fill in the rest with fun foods. And so I learned this approach from my coach David, and he and Megan are like evangelists for fun foods, so much so that like the day after a race, on my training plan it says burgers or pizza or fun foods or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of said in jest, but sort of not, because we do all these things that put us in such a caloric deficit. And so like when I ran a 50K in September, and I finished, and I was like, I want a burrito right now. And then I had a burrito, and then we had pizza for dinner. And I was like, this is I just had myself a great day. I ran for 6 hours. I had a like literally a foot long burrito, and then ate most of a pizza for dinner. And I felt fantastic the next day. And I placed 10th in that race. I had the race of my life. I had a breakthrough. It was fantastic. And I recovered like a champ. I fueled well. I took in 50 grams of carbs an hour for 6 hours. I took like Scratch was a sponsor of the race, so I was going from aid station to aid station, just like eating Scratch gummies and drinking Scratch hydration. It was like the most manicured, perfect setup for a race ever. And I honestly did that race because Scratch was a sponsor, and I saw how beautiful the photos were. And so I've learned over the years, particularly being here in Boulder, like I've gotten to know Gwen Jorgensen pretty well, and she's an Olympic gold medalist, and her husband Pat is a fantastic cook, and we share a lot of meals. Kate and I share a lot of meals um with them, and just to see how an athlete at that level eats, like people would be surprised with how much fueling and how much food these types of people eat, um because there's no other way to do the work without doing that as well. The other thing that I've learned is that um eating disorder culture is prevalent and
Oh yeah.
pervasive here, and here in particular.
Mm-hmm.
um People I know have had challenges being here because of how people look. And you can't make assumptions about how people look and their relationship with food. But
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of like really skinny and athletic, like beyond athletic looking people here who have experienced eating disorders. And for people who have experienced that, that's like a triggering experience.
Yeah.
And so like you go on a run on the North Boulder roads, and like you're going to see professional athletes and elite athletes and Olympians and elite amateurs, and these people who like visually appear to be the pinnacle of performance in that they're running really fast. And at the same time, many of them are struggling with their relationship with food. And I didn't realize how pervasive eating disorders were until I moved here.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of people I know here who have struggled with that, it's like 10x what I knew in Boston, um, or more. And that's sad. And it's sad that that's the experience that so many people have. Um, and the number of times that's come up on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mine too.
I Yeah, I had a conversation with Carrie Verdon, who is next week running the Olympic trials, and um, she was in tears on the podcast talking about her experience. And Heather Wetmore, the coach at CU, basically told her, like, you are going down a bad path, and you've got to, like, and Heather saved her career. And so it's fascinating, like, how people come out of something like that and then like have a second chance. And on the flip side, there are so many people that have been struggling with it for decades, um, and are challenged by it on a regular and routine basis. And it's everywhere here, which is challenging for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's very infrequent that I get a high performing athlete who doesn't have some history of something. And if it's not a full blown eating disorder, even if it wasn't undiagnosed, disordered eating is so normalized in the sporting world and
Right.
especially in endurance sports. So I imagine in a town like Boulder, it's even more normalized, right? So that's just very, very tricky. And I work predominantly, I've had some elite athletes, but I work predominantly with recreational athletes. And I think sometimes people and I see a lot of underfueling. It's like one of the main thing I see, and whether it's intentional or not, there's a lot of reds. There's just a lot of this stuff, and people get it into their mind that it's like, oh, well, just because I'm not an elite athlete, maybe I don't have to fuel the same or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, I think any dietitian in this space can tell you that trying to combat chronic underfueling is and carb phobia and all these things, that's like the main thing we do. It's just so prevalent. And it's crazy because I mean, literally yesterday I had a client who's not even training for anything. She's like, a Peloton enthusiast, but very active and works out most days. And she wasn't eating carbs after 4 p.m. because of a passing comment from a trainer 10 years ago. I mean,
But that's the thing, people don't
what the
realize the power
actual
they have
I
in what they
know.
say. And
I know.
the challenge
This
is
isn't
that, like,
uncommon.
yeah, and everybody eats. So everybody thinks that they're an expert
Mm-hmm.
on food. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, this worked for me. So you should do it too."
Yeah, and the comment, I mean, it just made me so sad for her because this is a pattern I see all the time where for some reason or another, there's no carbs at your dinner. It's just protein and veggies. And I'm like, why? Why aren't you doing this? And it's all kinds of reasons. But in this particular case, yeah, she's like, yeah, I was working with a trainer about 10 years ago. And he said I didn't really need carbs after 4 p.m. because I was kind of not doing much after that and going to bed. And I'm like, dude, oh my God. like and she's like I mean, I didn't always follow it. Like sometimes I'd have pasta or something as a treat, and I'm like, did you just hear yourself? Like, you've been living with 10 years of guilt for eating carbs after 4 p.m. because of something a trainer said. Like, that's so tragic, you know like I don't know, that just made me so sad for her. But unfortunately, this stuff is so incredibly common. So yeah, we have to be really careful about where we consume our nutrition information. We have to be careful about what we say, and people who are not nutrition professionals or even nutrition professionals, we all have to be careful about what we say when it comes to food and body.
Definitely.
But kind of circling back to the whole Boulder thing, I mean, I imagine just because of how concentrated of an athletic community it is, I would hope that there's more support for these things. And I know
Yeah, I mean,
that
there's like
times
a
are changing.
dietitian on every street.
There's probably a dietitian on every street. There's probably like a sports focused therapist on every street. I mean, I would hope that there's support, or I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not plugged into the Boulder scene. You are, but I just hope that there's support for these people. And I know it's still incredibly prevalent, but I also know that times are slowly changing. And, we're trying to spread the word that it's not okay to not have your period and things like that. Right. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious how that shifts, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of conversations happening both in public and behind the scenes, whether it's like an event at Fleet Feet or Runner's
Hmm.
Roost or whatever, where experts are talking. I mean, here in Boulder, we have Team Boss as a pretty good example of how to do it right.
Hmm.
They they've been spending a lot of time in Crested Butte lately, but when they're here, they they're frequent uh, Pizzeria Alberico attendees, and they're sharing it on Instagram, and they're out at there's a food hall, I forget what it's called, Avanti or Rosetta Hall, and they go there and they post it on social. And so you know that these athletes are, they're running 80 to 120 miles a week, and they're congregating around food and they're celebrating around food. And I've gotten to know a couple of them, Kate Grace and a few others, and I can see and sense their strong relationships with food and with each other and mealtime. And it's wonderful to see the influence that they can have just by posting like team
Hmm.
dinners, and
Yeah.
showing that it's not just like a plate of salad with iceberg lettuce and croutons, and that's it.
Sure.
They're having dense, nutritionally dense foods that are helping them perform at the highest level. And so this starts from the top. And Emma Coburn is the pioneer of this team, and her husband Joe Bosshart. The two of them have made a really excellent example. I've worked with Aisha Pratt-Lear over the years via Inside Tracker, and same thing with her, like not afraid to eat, and she's an Olympian um, for Jamaica, and it's great to see these types of people leading by example. And that's the beauty of social media, that you can see what the pros are doing. And I've shared meals with these people, and like this is what they're actually doing. It's not a facade.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's really cool to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the one thing I would add, I mean, that's all fantastic. I do get people though that are like, well, I'm not running 80 to 100 miles a week, so I can't
Right.
eat like that. Or, oh, well, it's a rest day, so I can eat blah, blah, blah. And so we're combating a lot of that again on the recreational side, or where people may or may not see, based on whether or not they follow elite sporting activities,
Right.
right? But they kind of have in their head that they have to be doing a great amount of exercise in order to quote unquote deserve or earn food. So that's a lot of what I work on as well with people, is that whole concept. And because at the end of the day, whether you're a pro, whether you're a recreational runner, whatever, I mean, all of this has to be sustainable, right? And that's where that kind of, you were talking about the fun foods and all that stuff. Like, if you're not doing that stuff, this is not going to last long. You're going to be miserable. Like, none of this is going to work. So it's all about finding something that is sustainable for you. And that goes back to that, what I was saying earlier, is like everything works for somebody, but is it sustainable? Can you keep going with this for a while?
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
you mentioned Scratch. I know it's one of your kind of sponsors and stuff too, but I'm curious, aside from Scratch, what are some of your favorite sports nutrition products?
Yeah, Scratch is wonderful. I did a sweat test or a sodium test with
Mm-hmm.
their dietitian
Precision.
Colette,
Oh yeah, Colette.
um,
Mm-hmm.
2 summers ago, and learned that I'm a
Nice.
very salty sweater. So
Mm-hmm.
I I have a soft spot in my heart for um, for salt products. So I also am a big fan of Cherbundi, the tart cherry juice
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
company. I think they're doing really cool stuff to promote recovery and sleep and that kind of stuff. Um, I've worked with Salt Stick on
Mm-hmm.
the salt and rehydration side of things. And I use the sauna 3 or 4 times a week, and
I was gonna ask you about that.
yeah, being a salty sweater, I'm like no longer fearing sodium and salty foods, particularly like when consumed right after the
Mm-hmm.
sauna. And I noticed that when I started to replenish sodium appropriately, I was recovering better. Go figure. So yeah, those are some of the sports nutrition products that I like.
How much
I've
salt
been
do you lose? Do you remember what it
yeah, it
is
was like
per liter?
1,400. I think the
Oh,
average
okay.
was 800 or something, 700 or
I
something
think
like that.
it's yeah. Well, I think the average is like 980 milligrams per liter. I
Right.
was 13, I want to say. So I'm pretty. Do you are you a heavy sweater though?
Yeah, I'm not only a
Oh,
salty sweater, I'm a heavy
you're
sweater
heavy.
too.
Okay, so
And so
that's
because I
rough.
use the sauna 4 times a week, I'm a really efficient sweater and I start sweating really early. And so that's
Mm.
the adaptation you get from regular sauna use. And so it helps you cool, but you also need to replenish more frequently, of course.
Is that why you
Um,
do the sauna? Is it to
no,
kind of
I
just
just I
you just
just
like it?
love it. I love
Okay.
it. I mean, it gets hot here in the summer, and so to
Mm-hmm.
be able to like run when it's 95 or 100 degrees out and feel like comfortable, quote unquote, um,
Mm.
feels like a superpower. Um, and I kind of like welcome when it gets super hot because I use the sauna year round, and so it's never like, oh, now it's summer. I gotta like
Mm-hmm.
adapt for heat. I'm like pretty heat adapted at all times. But I love the all the research related to regular sauna use for cardiovascular benefit and reduction of all cause mortality, the mental and cognitive benefits, the reduction in um, cognitive decline over like there are so many benefits related to regular sauna use, and it's dose dependent. So the more you do it, the better it works, and the more it helps to a point because it's still a stress. So you don't want to
Yeah.
like use it 9 times a week, but
Sure.
um, in a person who's like not crazy active, doing it twice a week versus once a week is beneficial. Doing it 4 times a week versus twice a week is beneficial. Doing it 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, again, to a point when you're if you're not stress limited with all these other things going on in life. But I run 50 to 70 miles a week, so I can't sauna 7 days a week as much
Sure.
as I'd like to.
How long do you
Um,
spend in there usually?
I do between 20 and 30 minutes.
Oh,
Sometimes
okay.
I do like 25 minutes in and then come out for 3 or 4 minutes and then go back in. And so it's that cooling and reheating and cooling mechanism that like really gives you the benefit of those heat shock proteins. And I've spoken with a handful of performance experts who say like that's the way to do it if you're really
Mm.
looking for the best bang for your buck and you've got 40 minutes to spend in or 30 minutes to spend in the sauna or in and around the sauna.
And are you doing it like adjacent to a workout, or is it just something separate you're doing? And are you also drinking electrolytes while you're in there, or how do you kind of handle that?
Yeah, so I've read that the best benefit from a heat adaptation standpoint is to not drink anything in the sauna. I'm
Mm.
not looking for perfect maximal results, so I
Sure.
drink in the sauna. I'll either put in electrolytes from scratch or salt stick or element or whatever, or I'll I'll drink an athletic brewing beer. Um, and
There
I
you go.
yeah, and I will usually do it. Actually, I almost always do it in the afternoon. Um, and I don't do it on Fridays because I long run the next day. But I have almost no rules around the sauna besides that. Sometimes I do it on Fridays. Um, but when I'm in training and doubling, I'll do like a 20-minute run straight into the sauna. And I notice that my heart rate is like 10 beats per minute higher on average when I go straight into the sauna from a run.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it like the time to um, discomfort is much quicker. Uh,
Hey, everybody, just a quick break to share a few things that are going on. If you are a regular listener of the show, I know you've heard these things before. I'm still selling my Eat for Endurance hats. Actually, I have one right here since we're on video. I'm going to show it to you. Woohoo! They're really awesome hats by Boko Gear. I wear mine all the time, super comfy. and it's free shipping. You get a really awesome sticker. I don't have one handy, otherwise I'd show you. With every purchase of a hat, each hat is $40 with the shipping included. So head on over to my shop page on eatforendurance.com to grab yours, and all proceeds go towards supporting all this free content that you're getting right now. And my peak performance course is so close to being done. I have been kind of trying to figure out how to record it to get the best quality and just a few other things. This is all very new to me, creating a course. I'm late to the game here, so I appreciate your patience. I know I've been talking about this course for a long time. And again, if you haven't listened to episode 80, that really gives you a good taste of the course, at least the audio part. It's the full module 1 for free that you guys get to enjoy. It's about 48 minutes. So you can head on over there to my podcast page and download that episode and get to check that out. And lastly, if you don't want to spend any money, but you want to support the show, it's always appreciated if you give the show a follow wherever you listen. You rate and review it. You send it to your friends. Just get the word out. It's so appreciated. If you do want to throw a few bucks my way, I do have a Patreon page, and you can also contribute there. So any of those things are so appreciated. Thank you for being a part of this community and for supporting me and for listening. I am so glad you're here.
Sauna's interesting. Some of the research is like, yeah, it's super subjective about when it starts to be really beneficial, and much of that shows that the real benefit comes like 2 to 4 minutes after you start getting uncomfortable. And again, that's super subjective. So for me, like, I can sit in the sauna for 35 minutes before it starts becoming uncomfortable on some days, and some days it's 20 minutes, but it's usually never less than 20 minutes at 195 degrees. And a couple of friends have the Sisu sauna, which gets up to 230. And at 210, 220 degrees, like, my heart rate will get to 140 by the end of that. And so the heart rate chart is fascinating because it's just a steady increase to a point where it's the equivalent of an easy run for the last 5 minutes. And those ones get really uncomfortable almost immediately, but like tolerable. But by the end of like a 30-minute session at 220 degrees, like, you're cooked.
Is this like another Boulder average thing? Like, everyone has their own little standalone sauna that they're doing their own heat training in?
I've got like 10 or 12 friends with saunas. Yeah.
Do you guys have cold plunges too? Like,
I have a cold plunge, and I've used it twice.
Of course you do. That's hilarious. I mean, it's so funny because I see all your sauna pictures. I see your barbecue pictures, which we're going to get to in a second because all that looks delicious too. But I'm just so curious about this. And I mean, I imagine too, because right now it's like freezing where you are. I mean, does it make it harder?
Have you ever been in a sauna when it's snowing?
No.
It's incredible.
Never.
Same thing with a hot tub. I didn't know that was a thing until I spent 2 months in Breckenridge, and we would sit out in outdoor hot tub. I guess most hot tubs are outdoors. But
yeah, sure.
Like, sit in the hot tub with a wool hat on and snow coming down. It was fantastic. But yeah, doing it. So mine is in my backyard. Like, see if I can spin the camera over that way.
It's like all snowy. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's often a very cold walk back to the house.
Cold walk. Yeah.
But my favorite memory from it was last winter. One day I got in, and I knew there was like a cold front coming. I got in, it was like 40 degrees outside, and I got out of the sauna 25 minutes later, and it was 5 degrees out. And it dropped
Seriously?
35 degrees in 20 minutes. We have this weird weather, but
crazy.
Yeah, to get out of the sauna when it's that cold outside you're like, no, I'd rather stay in when it's 200 degrees warmer in this little box than it is on the other side of this glass.
That's funny. That's so funny. And since we're talking about backyard stuff, tell me about your whole barbecue thing, because your Instagram pictures, those look delicious. I'm always like drooling. So is this a new hobby? Is it something you've always been interested in? Is this another Boulder average thing? Like, what is this?
It's the meme that, like, when a man turns 30, they become interested in one of 3 things. Like, anyway, one of them is grilling.
Yeah, there you go.
So, or smoking meat. So when I bought my house, my roommate in Boston was like, he has a smoker. He's like, if I got you a smoker, would you use it? I was like, sure. I think I would.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I was glad that I said yes. I think he got it because he wanted to use it when he would come here. He comes here for like a month or 2 months at a time in the winter.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, it's a great life. um and yeah, so again, I really like congregating around food.
hmm
And so I smoked a tri-tip earlier this week, and it was just like, oh, it was so good.
I saw it. I was
Um
very jealous.
it was very good. And just the bark that you can get from smoked meat, red meat on a Traeger, just like I went to Nashville a few weeks ago and I got barbecue and I was like, this isn't even that good. Like I can make
Really?
better barbecue. Nashville's not
That's
a
funny.
red meat barbecue town. It's like
Oh,
a
okay.
pork and chicken town.
Got
I
it.
didn't
Got
know
it.
that, and I got the brisket because we were at a smokehouse. I
Got it.
was like, I make a better brisket than these guys. Are you kidding me? Um, but yeah, to do like a 10-hour, 12-hour smoked brisket, start 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, come back, and it just so good. It's so good.
We had these friends in New York City back when it's been, gosh, it's almost 3 years since we moved, but they had like this little miniature. They were kind of on the bottom floor of this walk up, and they had this little miniature backyard, and so they had a smoker. The guy was like super into it, so they would have these like brisket parties, and he would make the brisket. We would all bring the sides and all the things, the drinks, whatever, and it was just the best. So that was kind of our version of that back in the city, but yeah, I haven't really experienced that since then because
Yeah,
we don't have a barbecue or anything like that. But it's definitely delicious.
it's so good. I have a
Yeah.
few friends who have had kids in the last year or so, and all the women, like my friends who have babies, they're like, I need red meat, and so like they come over and we have a smoked brisket, and so
There
I'm
you
like
go.
helping them, get back
Get
on
your
the
iron
on
in.
the Faraday
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah. There you go. What challenges do you feel like you are still facing with your nutrition? And this can be performance nutrition. This can be everyday nutrition. Where do you feel like you're at right now?
So, I don't think I eat enough for breakfast, and I can't
Hmm.
figure out how to make that happen. And I've been so today I listened to the Swap podcast with David and Megan,
Mm-hmm.
and David had just done an Insight Tracker test, and he was talking about his SHBG levels, which is a biomarker that can be influenced by, if high, can be influenced by either needing to eat more calories from either protein often, and within day energy deficits can contribute to that. And so
Mm-hmm.
David and I both have elevated SHBG.
Hmm.
I have seen this in my tests frequently. Sometimes I'm able to get it down, but he was talking about how he probably wasn't eating enough for breakfast, but eating enough the rest of the day. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm doing the same thing. I eat a bowl of oatmeal with peanut butter and blueberries, and sometimes I'll usually have a scratch recovery shake, but that's probably like 400 calories, maybe,
Mm.
mostly
Yeah.
from the peanut butter,
Yeah.
at least being half of it. And so it's like something that's on my mind that I just haven't fixed yet.
Is that pre or post? Like, because you
Post
ran
run.
8 and post.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Are you eating before your run?
I have an applesauce packet, and I use a product called Two Before, and it's
Oh,
a
what's
New
that?
Zealand blackcurrant. So similar properties to like uh like beets, but tastes
Mm.
much better and
Mm-hmm.
has immune supporting properties as well as recovery benefits. And then I take a half serving of Scratch's super high carb mix.
Oh, okay.
So like
So you're getting
200,
carbs in.
yeah. So the two before doesn't have carbs, but the applesauce does, and
Yeah.
then it's like 40 grams of carbs from the Scratch. So
Are
that's
you
pre-run
are you making your oatmeal with water or with a milk of some kind?
water.
So I mean, this is like a typical thing I see in my clients, and that's always an easy fix. I don't know if you drink dairy or whatever. You could always do a non-dairy, like a soy milk
Yeah.
instead. But one of the first things I do, just because like I always feel like the best way to initially do things is to make the tiniest little tweak to what you're always
Yeah.
already doing, because then it's easy. So that kind of swap, unless you have a taste aversion, because sometimes people are like, I don't like it, it's too creamy.
No.
I mean, that just like, say you add a cup of milk, it's like, boom, you have 8 grams more protein. If you use a Fairlife milk or something like that, it's like 13 grams more protein, and you get some carbs in there, more calories or whatever. Or a soy milk, don't do an
Yeah.
almond milk or a rice milk, because that's doesn't have much. But something like that's so easy, just to kind of get it up. And that's
Cool.
just, it gets like a tiny little thing that, you know, you can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, within day energy deficit, and I'm guilty of this too as a dietitian. Like, it's like that very typical, like, you're your own worst patient kind of thing. I'll be
Yeah.
like preaching all this stuff and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't eat for like 5 hours. Fuck.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, to get really zoned into something. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely research supporting that even a very small within day energy deficit can really have a huge impact. So I think that's a big one for a lot of people, because I see that
Yeah.
all the time. People are going sometimes like 6 hours without eating something. We know that's not good. Or they're
Yeah.
just relying on hunger cues, which also is not adequate for most people. Okay, so working on your breakfast. Anything else that you feel like you could dial in further?
I think I'm always into like movement after exercise, the postprandial. I forget what the next word is.
You mean after eating?
Yes.
Postprandial movement, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of benefit related to insulin levels and A1C, and both of those levels for me are fine, but they're on the like high end of optimal. So it's just something I want to keep an eye on. But I like movement. I like breaking up my day with movement. And my problem is I sit on my butt for 8 hours, or
Me too.
I work for 2 hours, I go for a run, and I
Yeah.
sit for 6 more hours. Like,
Yeah.
I should go for a walk. Like, one of the things that I lost with working from home, I used to go out to eat every single meal at lunch at work, which isn't great, but at least I was walking 5-10 minutes and breaking up the day in that way.
Yeah.
And then I would bike commute home after run commuting to the office. So like, I've lost the movement, breaking up, breaking the day into thirds. So that's less nutrition, but sort of tangential.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I work from home here in California, and back when I was in the city, I still worked from home, but I mean, just living in New
In the
York, you're
city,
just
yeah.
constantly, you're just like, it's like, oh wow, I did 10,000 steps. I don't even know what happened. Of course, in my
Right.
house, I have stairs, so sometimes I get 10,000 steps just running around my house. But usually I'm just like sitting on my butt, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I haven't gotten up in 4 hours. And one of my PTs just was reminding me, like, do movement snacks, you know, where you just get up every so often, just do some stretches or whatever. I've been terrible. I've not done it,
Yeah.
but it's something on my to-do list for
Yeah.
myself. So we were talking offline about this, and I know you were talking on social media about your little N of 1 experiment with ketones for 40 days. I know you recently got sick, and we'll just chalk that up to a bad coincidence. But
Or maybe I didn't get as sick because my body was thriving.
yeah. I mean, look, ketones are an interest. I mean, I'll guess I haven't tried it personally, so I can't say anything. I've heard the anecdotal claims, I've seen the marketing claims, and I've seen the research. That's all I can comment on. It's a really interesting one just because so many people are sharing positive stories about it. And some of the marketing claims are kind of crazy.
Bold.
Yeah, they're very bold. Based on the current research, from what I've seen at least, it seems unclear whether or not ketone supplementation, ketone ester in particular, offers any actual benefits. So I know you're doing this just as an N of 1 thing, and I know that Delta G's is supporting you. They sent you free samples. So I'm kind of curious where are you in this 40-day, like what day are you, and what are you taking away from it so far?
So I fell into this because I went to TRE and was given a bunch of HVMN samples.
What's
or
TRE?
ketone,
Sorry.
The running event in Austin.
Got it. Oh,
It's
yeah,
like
of course.
yeah.
Yep.
For those who don't know, it's just like a crazy initially intended for run specialty and running store buyers and brands to connect, and now it's just like an
Influencer Central.
central, yeah. Paired with barbecue and great
Nice.
weather. And so I was doing so many podcasts. I did 3 or 4 podcasts in a 2-day period after like just going full, like all out from meeting people and meetings and this kind of stuff. And I was like so depleted prior to these podcasts and panels. And I had somebody gave me the Ketone IQ gave me these samples, and I tried them prior to the panels. And so 3 times I was like, whoa, this is phenomenal. I cannot believe how good I feel cognitively, like sense of presence and sense of awareness and like a little bit buzzed kind of a vibe, but like really
Mm.
dialed at the same time and just really, really present. And so I'm in this group chat with a bunch of friends who basically just like pace a couple of them at races, so Western States and Leadville and whatever. And so TJ, one of them, consumed a lot of ketones during Leadville, and one of them is Kylie,
Mm-hmm.
dietitian that I've worked
Mm-hmm.
with. And so I mentioned, I was like, "Oh, TJ, like I'm on the ketone train. I get it now. It's great." And Kylie was like, "No, you got to use Delta G. Delta G is the ester, like the full ester. HVMN is basically half of it.
Yeah.
The difference is one is like a $7 serving product, and the other is $25.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, so I how did this happen? I reached out to Delta G and I was like, I oh, so I listened to David and Megan on their podcast talking about the
Mm-hmm.
benefit of post exercise ketone supplementation. They're like, people are doing it all wrong. They're all making these claims that if they take it pre, they feel fantastic. But the majority of the research is actually around post workout consumption related to um, hematocrit and hemoglobin
Mm.
improvements. And so I'm sitting here listening, having spent 2 months at high altitude a couple of years ago, and I saw like very dramatic improvements related to hemoglobin and hematocrit. My hemoglobin went from, I think it was like 15 or 16 to 18.6, and my hematocrit went from 46 to 53, which would flag a like a doping flag if I were being
Yeah.
tested.
Yeah.
Um, and so these numbers skyrocketed. I felt like a superhuman. This was from 6 weeks at 10,000 feet. And so altitude has the potential to influence EPO production by, I think the number is 50%. And so I'm like, okay, I'm a hyper responder to altitude potentially. If ketone supplementation has anywhere from 20 to 26% boost in EPO production, um, maybe I'll see dramatic improvements related to doing this. Well, what if I do it for a month or some period of time? So I reached out to Delta G at Kylie's recommendation. They're like, we love this. This is great. Like, here, we'll send you some. So they sent me a liter of ketones. A liter of ketones is $1,000. Like crazy. So I've consumed 20% of it so far, and it's in this Nalgene bottle that looks
Oh
like
my God.
water. And so I'm sitting here with $1,000 Nalgene bottle in my refrigerator, and I'm like, if somebody drinks this, that's like $9 a gulp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm like terrified that I have this thousand
Wait, they
dollar.
sent it to you in a Nalgene container?
Yep.
That's hilarious. Does it
So
does it taste like anything? I've
it's
never
pretty
tried it.
bad. It's pretty bad. HVMN is like, maybe it's because now I'm jaded from the Delta G, which is like just the
Okay.
ester. The
Mm.
HVMN tastes a bit more like alcohol-y.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to say the wrong compound or form, but anyway, um, so I've consumed 20% of it. I know because the meter is down to 80 milliliters it's down to 80 milliliters on the bottle, which means I've consumed $200 worth of ketones.
Well, I mean, okay, can we just say, first of all, aside from the fact that research wise it's in its infancy and we don't really have the true research to support it, it's like cost prohibitive to a
Yeah.
lot of people,
So the idea,
so that's the problem.
yeah, the idea is that not you wouldn't use it every day, but like maybe
Sure.
1 or 2 times a week. But I'm
Yeah.
just going all in. I'm doing it
Yeah. Yeah.
like after any run longer than 4 miles.
Okay.
Um, so not the 4 mile runs and not on my rest days. So basically 5 days a week. Um,
Okay. And how much
and
are you doing? Like, are you doing a specific dose?
yeah, so one dose, which is 25 milliliters.
Okay.
Um, so it's basically $25 a serving,
Yeah.
$1 per milliliter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I took a blood test with Inside Tracker 2.5 weeks ago, and
Mhm.
my hemoglobin, hematocrit, and testosterone values were all pretty consistent with where they were in that um, prior to high altitude test,
Okay.
which I was at sea level, and so
Yeah.
now I'm seeing similar results at anyway. So I have a similar baseline. I'll probably do a like mid trial test, and then I'll do a post trial test. So the cool thing is, after David and I were talking about this, he told me that somebody else reached out to him uh, from the podcast that they did related with their own desire to do this. But
Hmm.
fortunately, it was a woman, and
Hmm.
she, even more fortunately, she's an exercise physiology researcher,
Very cool.
and I believe has a master's in all this stuff. So
Hmm.
whereas I'm doing it from like, oh yeah, I'm interested. I've got 45 rounds of blood data to compare it to over the last 10 years. She's an actual researcher with like science chops. And again, more importantly, she's a woman, and most of the research is in men. And
Yeah.
so she has an interesting, she'll have an interesting, similar N of one experiment. And Delta G was like, this is fantastic because we don't have a lot of like this novel, exhaustive biomarker research on people. They have the research that they've done related to the military. They have the research that
Sure.
is commercially and publicly available. Um, but I'm fascinated to see what will happen. The challenge, as we talked about, is I got sick last week. I have a
I
cold,
know.
and my
Yeah.
HRV is in the tank, and I'm like, well, I don't really feel good in the first uh, quarter or 20% of this experiment, but um, I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, you have time. I mean, I guess you could always add on some days,
Yeah, I mean, I still have
make up for
800
it.
milliliters left,
Oh
so
God. Wow. Okay. And I mean, and I am curious, like I mean, look, it's again an N of one thing. It's nothing official, obviously. Um, so it's always hard to kind of tease out what's the ketone and what's something else. But I'm
right.
curious kind of what comes out of it. Because yeah, I've certainly, from other dietitians, Bob Seebahar, and uh, Dina Griffin, who both been on my show, they have a podcast, and they, I think, interviewed a guy from Delta G, and um, I forget what they were talking. Oh, I think they were crewing a friend, and they were just saying how they witnessed giving ketones to their friend who was running bad water or whatever it was, and it was like a flip, like a switch just flipped, and she just was like suddenly like alert and awake, and it was like just crazy to see. So like you keep hearing about these things, so I'm always open minded to this stuff, but I'm also trying to be a little critical given what's
Yeah.
out there. So.
And that's why I felt it was so important to like caveat it all with like, this is my
Mm-hmm.
experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I believe strongly in N of one, and that's like why I work at Insight Tracker,
Yeah.
and how I make decisions related to my nutrition and my health in general, to understand like, no, it's not, this didn't work for you, so it's going to work for me. It's like, I see that this is working for me. But the feeling that I got from the HVMN ketone IQ shots, from a cognitive benefit, like if that's
Mm-hmm.
placebo, I'll pour $7 down the drain every
Yeah.
single time for that feeling. Like
Sure.
it's like rocket fuel for your brain. And so my understanding is that that product is more geared towards the cognitive improvements,
Sure.
whereas Delta G is more on the performance aspect. But
Yeah.
like Sarah Hall and Des Linden are promoting HVMN, and they're sponsored by HVMN. At Charlie Lawrence, the guy that ran the 50-mile world record a few weeks ago, works with them too. And I talked with Des about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I've been trying these for months, and like I wouldn't promote it if it weren't working." And she's like, "It works. It works really well." And so somebody like that is like so allergic to bullshit, and she
Mm-hmm.
has no need to promote things that don't work.
Sure.
So anyway, it's fascinating. I suggest the piece is like it's so far into the 1% that I think it's a waste of time and money for most people. So like
Yeah,
if you're
I
listening to
agree.
this, please don't go out and buy ketones because
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
last
yeah,
10
yeah.
minutes. Like make sure you're sleeping and eating and recovering and
Yep,
taking care of your brain, and
100%.
like that's the part that matters. And like I like the experimentation aspect, and I have the ability to, do 3 blood tests from Insight Tracker in like a 90-day period or whatever. And so I'm able to evaluate it in a way that other people aren't, both objective and subjectively, and can
Yeah,
make a decision for myself. But at the same time, I'm sleeping 8 hours a night. I'm recovering. I'm running easy miles. I'm doing most of the things in the 90%. I still need to put my phone away before I go to bed, like everybody else
me
on the
too.
planet. But yeah, I don't want people to listen to this and be like, I got to spend $1,000 on ketones right
No,
now.
no, no, no. Yeah, no, I definitely will not let that message get out there. I mean, I always tell people when it comes to supplementation, I mean, supplementation is like a whole thing, but certainly with performance supplements, you have to go back to the basics, as you just said, sleep, right? Like the basics of nutrition, like all that kind of stuff, stress levels, like you can't expect to throw a bunch of money at some random thing like ketones and expect it to solve all your problems. And I always like to give the
Right.
example of a client I had who came to me and ended up being like severe hydration issues. His sodium and fluids were just not dialed at all, but he was like throwing up every time he did a long run, and he was like asking me about ketones, and I'm like, dude, like, why are you asking about ketones? Like, let's have you not barf first, okay? Like, you know what I mean? So people, it's really easy to get all caught up in the hype surrounding like the latest product. And I imagine, again, being in Boulder, it's like even worse being like
Yeah.
in that kind of environment. But people just, they don't want to focus on the really boring basics. They want to
Yeah.
like go with the sexy new thing that's out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the message I always send to people. Are you currently training for anything right now? Like, what's kind of going on for you?
Consistency.
Okay. Just
Consistency. I
being
want
able
to
to
break
jump
5
into
and
something.
yeah, I want to break 5 in the mile this year.
Okay.
Um, I did a whole event around that last summer, and we went out in the first lap at 4:34 pace, and I wasn't looking at my watch, and I was like, why is this so hard? And it was because we were, you know, uh, like 6 seconds faster on the lap than we should have been,
Ah.
which is a really long time. Um, and I want to do a 50K, so like very different ranges.
Mm-hmm.
But this past summer, I trained for the mile, and I ran 5 flat. And then a few weeks later, like 6 or 8 weeks later, I ran a 50K. And it was fascinating to come into the 50K training with like such a strong engine and aerobic base.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was running uphill at 11,000 feet, feeling fantastic. And I think some of that is because like if you have such a strong engine, the higher altitude stuff is easier in a way. Um,
Mm.
Andy Wacker and I were running together yesterday. Andy's a fantastic trail runner who has exceptional range from short distance to like marathon to the marathon. He's running in the US 50K champs as well. So he's got great range. Anyway, he was like, I feel like being good at a mile is like pretty similar to being good at running uphill at 11,000 feet. So I was like, okay, that's pretty good validation from somebody who knows what they're talking about. Um, Basically, I like to be in a position where I can do whatever I want within either like 3 to 4 days or 3 to 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Particularly in the summer here in Boulder.
Yeah, because there's just so much going on, I'm sure.
Yep.
Totally. I love it. And just to kind of wrap things up, and this is more of a comment than a question, I just want to thank you as a fellow Jew and supporter of Israel for speaking up on your platform on the Israel-Hamas war. It's not something I've spoken. I mean, I've spoken a bit on social media. It's not something I've mentioned on my podcast at all. But obviously, it's something that's been on both of our minds and many other people's minds since the atrocious events of October 7th. And you interviewed an Israeli athlete. I really loved that interview. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, it's just been a very challenging and eye-opening time for Jewish people across the globe, as you very well know. And we've had many chats, random chats on Instagram in the DMs, and that just helped me feel less alone in it all. And I've had some similar chats. There have been kind of like a small group of other people that I've been chatting with. And I just want to say thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and likewise. I know every time I post something about it, I'm gonna get a kudos or a heart or a comment from you on it, and it's hard to understand unless that's what you're experiencing. And
Yeah.
one of the things that obviously it's incredibly horrible and isolating in many ways, and at the same time, it's brought people together in
Mm.
ways that I could not have imagined. I got a hat in the mail yesterday. It's basically this hat, but a logo that says "Nice Jewish Runners." It's a group in New York that has
Nice.
come together over the
Oh,
last
yeah.
few
My friend
weeks.
Elise has posted on that,
Yeah,
actually.
and so um, yeah, it's just horrible, and th there's just I yeah, there we could spend another hour and a half
I know.
on that
I know.
conversation.
And I mean, I didn't want to go through this podcast without at least mentioning it. And I
Yeah,
also didn't want it to be the main feature of this podcast,
right.
obviously, because that's not what this podcast is about. But um, it's one of the, like, at least for me, I mean, I don't have a huge platform. I have like, I don't know, 4,500 followers or whatever. But in the beginning, much like you, it was just like this frantic like posting of things because we were just like, what the fuck's happening? And then it was like, holy shit, this is, I know for me, and I saw for you too, you took a social media break. I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I'm gonna have like
Yeah,
a mental breakdown. And so then I kind of just like stopped completely and then just started having these kind of side conversations with people about stuff. And then now it's like I kind of turned, as you saw online, like I've been really focusing my efforts on more in-person and local activism. So I've been like
yep,
really active in my community, which has been very hard, but also very rewarding and meaningful. And because, I'm raising two young girls here who are very involved in the Jewish community, and it's just been really hard. So, yeah, I don't know. It's one of these things where I feel like my my Instagram stories are like schizophrenic at times. Like I literally am like posting about a war, and then like here's some leucine content here, and
I saw that
and
today.
like
Yeah,
I know, and it's like, oh, and my grandma passed, so I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like people
yeah,
think
but
I'm
it's real
insane.
life. It's real life, and
Yeah,
that's
I
the thing.
mean,
Like this
it's
is
been all
it,
over.
yeah, and it's prevalent, and it's there, and if it makes people stop and think, good.
Yeah, and I recognize that not everyone agrees with me, with you, and that's fine,
No, that's been for
but
sure.
yeah, as we know.
I
But
mean,
what I've
like,
learned, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I mean, what I've learned, and this is particularly relevant to at least be speaking up in my community in person, is like no one else is going to speak up for us. Like we
Yeah,
have been fully outnumbered. Santa Cruz, when I grew up here, because I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, it was not a very Jewish place. So it was always like living in New York City, or when I did my birthright trip
yeah,
to Israel, it was like, holy shit, there are Jews in this world. Like I
yeah,
grew up
right.
being the only Jewish person in my school or in my class or whatever. And then now the Jewish community has really grown. But I mean, the city council meeting we went to, it was 9 hours of testimony that the mayor and the council members heard. It was crazy. It went till 3
Wow.
a.m. And I wasn't able to attend live in person, but I spoke via Zoom. But I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people saying, asking for this very one-sided resolution, ceasefire resolution to be passed, and saying just insane things and blatantly anti-Semitic things, untrue things. I mean, all of the same rhetoric we've heard. It was crazy, and many were very aggressive, unruly, violent. They were booing through my whole speech, simply because, I mean, I said the word Hamas, basically. It was kind of nuts. But my point is, like, if I don't speak up, and I've had this conversation with my husband even, because he was almost like, because the mayor got death threats, people were releasing their addresses, it was crazy, and he was like, maybe you shouldn't be using your name and doing this. I don't want you to put our family at risk. I'm like, look, it's fine, but yeah, it's been a very eye-opening experience, and if no one says anything, I mean, no one's going to speak for us. We have to fend for ourselves. That's kind of what I've learned.
Yeah, and we have to not be afraid of losing followers or listeners from it as well. Like
Yeah.
I had two interesting podcast reviews last week. One was, "This podcast is awesome. I'm balancing out the 1-star reviews that you've mentioned that you've been getting lately due to like sharing your feelings on things." And the next one was, "1 star. I used to love this podcast until I learned that he supports genocide."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh my God, I don't support genocide. This is
No.
outrageous. And the last thing I'll say on it is, like, it's crazy that people equate a desire to fight back with genocide, right? Israel sucks at genocide and apartheid if that's what genocide and apartheid looks like.
Yeah.
Plain and
Yeah.
simple. Like, that's not what's going on here. Anyway.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, as you've said yourself, and as I always say, it's like, I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a geopolitical expert. Like, I don't know everything. I certainly
Everybody
don't
else
have
seems to be.
answers. I know. I don't have answers. I mean, quite frankly, Israel's trying to like wipe out Hamas, like, and then what? I mean, I've been talking offline with a former client of mine who's Israeli, and it's like, is Israel just always going to be the target and always want to be wiped out? He's like, pretty much. I mean, this is just how it's been. It's always probably will be. And that's like a really sad reality. But I mean, we all want peace. We all want peace. We all want there to be no war, and we all want a ceasefire. But we also like don't want insane terrorists in power, and we also don't want to release like, I mean, I'll say one last thing, because this is a thing I got in response to what I posted. They were like, did you know that Israel turned down a ceasefire 2 months before, they rejected a permanent ceasefire where all the hostages would be released. I'm like, I looked into it more. I'm like, yeah, and all the Hamas terrorists, all of the Palestinian prisoners who are murderers would also be released, and Hamas was insisting on staying in power. And then they've promised again and again to do October 7th again, and that they'd murder all Jews worldwide. So why would they agree to that?
Right. And the crazy thing is that, like, we have all these people in the US that are so angry, who have never spoken to anyone who lives in the area. And all of a sudden everyone is like, this is the thing, that the hill that they'll die on, and the hill that they care so much about. And they've never spoken to anyone in the area. If you speak to people in Gaza or in any Palestinians or Israelis, like, they want peace, and they want Hamas removed. And so you have all these people who are standing on their high horse and thinking that they are so righteous. They're not, and they don't know what they're talking about. And that's the part that's so painful, that people have just decided that this is the thing that they're going to make their entire personality these days. And when Arabs kill other Arabs, nope, doesn't make any news. But when the Jews are doing it, front page.
It bubbled up to the surface so quickly. And one of the things that, my mom has been an activist in this for like almost a decade, and I've started really working hard in, is because a lot of this very, very anti-Israel rhetoric and all the stuff that we've seen in universities, the ethnic studies, like anti-Zionist ethnic studies curriculum, it's all in our schools everywhere, including in my local public schools. It's already been here. And so just kind of trying to provide more of a balanced perspective. And again, look, I mean, I appreciate that not everyone shares our point of view, and certainly not everyone understands. And maybe you're not Jewish, or maybe you are. There have been plenty of anti-Zionist Jews come out of the woodwork, it seems. But I think I'll just end this because this will just turn into this whole thing. So without making this podcast all about the Israel-Hamas war, which I know this is not. I know, seriously, we are. But I mean, my Jewish identity is really important to me. I know it's important to you. Israel, even though it's so far away, there's a reason why it's mentioned in every single Jewish holiday. So articles like New York Times saying that Israel is not really relevant to our Jewish identity is like kind of bonkers. But this stuff really is important, and it's been really really hard for a lot of people. And we're just trying to speak up about something that's important to us. So
Totally
I'm trying
agree.
my best to keep it separate when
Yep.
there are times when things pop up, like I get an opportunity to talk with you actually live, which is super
Yep.
cool, or something happens big in my community, like I shared my speech or my letter to the editor, then I share it. But I recognize that people aren't really here for this stuff. But you know what? Is like, as a dietitian, like, I am my brand. If
Right.
you can't accept the fact that being Jewish is like a big part of my identity, then okay, bye. You know what I mean? So, anyways, that's all I got to say about that for now. And I appreciate you
Of course,
about
and likewise.
that. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna wrap up with some quick bites questions, and then I know you got to be on your way to eat some lunch. What is your favorite post race meal or snack?
Burrito.
What kind of burrito do you get?
What I've been loving lately, burritos with potatoes or tater tots in them.
Ooh,
Yeah, real
yum,
good.
yum, yum, yum. I bet with the tater tots, like that crunch in there,
Oh yeah.
tasty. Worst race nutrition experience.
Worst race nutrition experience. CIM 2022, 3. I puked for 12 miles.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Why?
I took too much in too early,
Ugh.
and it decided it didn't want to stay.
Oof, that's the worst. Okay, no fun. Biggest cooking catastrophe if you've had one.
When I was like, I don't know, 10 years old, I put a loaf of bread in the microwave with the zip tie, with the like metal
Oh no!
tie on, and it caught on fire.
Oops.
I got to use a fire extinguisher.
Wait, you just like stuck the entire thing in like
Yeah, it was a
plastic?
frozen loaf of bread. I was 10.
That's fun. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. That's pretty funny though. What is the most exotic or interesting food that you've tried?
Octopus?
Hmm.
Not
Okay.
super
Did you like
exotic.
it?
Yeah, I love it.
I feel
Sushi,
like
yeah.
it's really chewy. I don't know.
It is
I
chewy.
can't get into
Yeah.
that. How do you like your eggs cooked? If you eat eggs.
Over medium or scrambled, which maybe is the same thing.
What is your favorite beverage?
Olipop or seltzer.
What are your comfort foods?
Pizza. Yeah.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla. Pretty boring.
Do you put anything on top, or is it literally just vanilla?
Maybe some
Just
Reese's.
vanilla. Okay. And last but not least, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Shoes. Of course. Top 3 items of gear. Well, that's a
You can
tough
count your
one.
sauna if you want.
A sauna. Yeah, we'll go with the sauna. And my Hydro Pack bottles, because I've gotta get my liquid and electrolytes back in.
Love it. Awesome. Jonathan, this has been so much fun. I'm glad we were
Yes.
able to connect and chat about so many different things today. And yeah, I wish you all the best with your podcast and your training and your sauna time and all the things you're doing.
Of course,
and
and
your ketones.
likewise.
I can't
I
forget the ketones.
appreciate it. Yeah, I seriously hope this turns around and turns better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then I'm like, well, now I have a really expensive habit.
Yeah, I know. They're not going to keep sending you $1,000 Nalgene bottles, right?
I hope they will, but
yeah.
let's see.
There you go. Awesome. Take care. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right, so that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about Jonathan. I certainly did. We had such a fun chat. And I know that bit about the end where we were talking about the Israel-Hamas war. I know you guys aren't here for that. If you didn't even make it this far, totally get it. That's not what you signed up for when listening to a nutrition podcast. But as you know, Jonathan and I were saying, Judaism is an important part of our identity, and what's going on or what has been going on has been very upsetting, and it's a very complicated situation. So again, I certainly appreciate that other people have different perspectives. I try to hear those perspectives, and I know not everyone agrees with me, and that's fine. Okay. But anyways, that's it for today. And again, just my usual announcements that if you want to come on the show, if you're a recreational athlete, if you know of another recreational athlete, or you want to nominate a elite pro athlete to come on the show for an athlete nutrition profile, I'm always looking for more guests. I have a ton of dietitian guests lined up. A lot of people jumped at that opportunity, so I think I've sat there for a while. But if you want to reach out and see if I'm interested in having on the show, like, please always do. I love hearing from people, because I'm trying to line up more content for this year. And again, if you want to keep these episodes coming, you can really support me by make sure you're following the show so you don't miss episodes, and rating and reviewing it and sharing it with your friends, buying my merch, doing all that stuff just to help grow my audience and throw a few bucks my way. It's always appreciated. All right, see you guys all next time.